The message sat on my screen like a lit match in a quiet room, small, bright, and capable of burning down the life I'd spent years keeping carefully the same. My thumb hovered over send, and for a second I could hear the old building around me, pipes ticking, the faint hum from the shop downstairs, my own breathing too loud. I'm James, 61. I live in a second-floor apartment above a barbershop in a mid-sized American city. The place is clean, not cozy, chosen that way on purpose. If you're watching this and you're anywhere near my age, you know how routines become armor. After my wife died, I built mine out of small, repeatable days. Same coffee mug, same grocery route, same polite conversations that end before they turn into invitations. No pets. People call that lonely. I call it prevention. A dog needs you. A cat expects you. Either way, you're responsible, and after loss, responsibility can feel like a trap. My wife, Linda, used to tease me about my systems. She'd say I could organize grief into labeled folders if I tried hard enough. After she was gone, the systems stayed and the laughter didn't. I stopped going to the diner we loved because the waitress would ask, "Just you tonight," like it was a wound she had to poke to prove it was real. I started buying the same frozen meals because they came with instructions and no memories. Even the barbershop downstairs had become part of my quiet. I'd nod at the guys through the stairwell window. I'd hear snippets, sports, weather, somebody's grandson in college. And I'd keep moving. Close enough to be human, far enough to be safe. I avoided complications. That was my word for anything that might pull me into someone else's life. New friendships, volunteer committees, cookouts, even long phone calls. I wasn't rude. I was careful. Then a woman from the church's support group asked me to help with their budget. It wasn't dramatic, just a clipboard and the assumption that because I'd done accounting for decades, I could straighten out some numbers. The group met in a social center. Folding chairs, old coffee, bright lights that make everyone look tired. I went because it was easier to say yes once than to explain no forever. I sat near the back with my notebook, already planning how fast I could finish and slip out. That's when I noticed her. Anne. She was in a wheelchair, but she wasn't asking the room for permission to exist. One side of her body moved slower, like it had to negotiate with itself, but her attention was razor sharp. When someone said something vague, she asked a real question. When a well-meaning man called her brave, she smiled and said, "If bravery paid rent, I'd be in a bigger place." The room laughed with her, not at her. And I realized I wasn't looking at the chair. I was looking at the way she owned the space around it. After the meeting, people clustered in little circles. I focused on the spreadsheet, because numbers have always been my safest language. I corrected a line item, and told myself I'd leave the folder and be gone. "James," a voice said behind me. I turned, and rolled toward me with the ease of someone who'd had to learn how to do everything twice. She stopped at a respectful distance. "I saw you," she said. "Saw me doing what?" "Watching," she replied, amused. "Not the chair. The arguments." "I like logic," I said. "It's straightforward. That's what people say when they don't want to admit they're listening." She nodded toward the exit. "Walk with me." Not because I can't. Because I'm tired of people offering to carry me like I'm luggage. That made me laugh, an actual laugh I didn't plan. Outside, the parking lot was uneven. I held the door, then caught myself, not wanting to perform kindness like a badge. She noticed. "Relax," she said. "Doors are allowed." At her car, adapted with hand controls, she transferred carefully, methodically, with the practiced patience of someone who values independence more than speed. I stood there, hands in my pockets, feeling useless in a way that wasn't unpleasant. Different from lonely. More like awake. "So," she said, "are you coming back next week, numbers guy?" I looked at her, at the clear, unpitying way she asked, and something in me shifted. Not romance. Not fireworks. Just a crack in the wall I'd spent years building. "I'm helping with the budget," I said. "So yes." "Good," she said. "Because I'd rather argue with a man who can add." She started the engine, then paused. "And James?" "Yeah." "Don't let them turn you into a saint," she said. It's exhausting watching men try to live up to titles they didn't ask for. Then she drove off, leaving me in the cool air with my notebook pressed to my side. On my walk home from the center, I took the long way like a man buying time. A couple in their 70s shuffled past me, linked at the elbows, arguing gently about whether the sidewalk was icy. I remember thinking, not bitterly, just plainly, somebody gets to have that. Somebody still chooses company over comfort. Back upstairs, I washed the same mug, wiped the same counter, checked the same locks. Old habits pretending they were a plan. I even set the TV to a channel I didn't care about, just to fill the air. But every few minutes my eyes slid back to my phone, waiting for it to stop being a piece of plastic and become a decision. That night, my apartment felt louder. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was expectant. My phone sat on the table like a dare, and my mind kept replaying her humor, sharp, honest, no self-pity. And then the choice showed up, clean and brutal. Option A, write nothing. Keep my life exactly as it is, quiet routines, and a loneliness that at least doesn't surprise me. Option B, message her first. Open a door I might not be able to close. Accept that if she answers, my routine won't survive untouched. I stared at the blank screen, feeling 61 and stubborn and suddenly unsure. Part of me wanted the safety of silence. Another part, smaller but persistent, wanted to know what it felt like to be seen again. So, I typed. Not poetry, just truth. And this is James from the group. I enjoyed talking with you today. If you ever want coffee this week, I'd like that. No pressure. My thumb hovered. Then I hit send. And that's where I'll leave you, me, in a plain apartment above a barbershop, one lamp on, phone in my hand, fear in my chest, plus a thin, unfamiliar line of interest pulling against the quiet. By the third week, the waitress didn't ask if we wanted menus anymore. She just brought 2 coffees, black for me, oat milk for, and said same time next Tuesday, like it was already decided. That's how habits start, by the way. Not with declarations. With repetition. If you're listening to this, you know what I mean. At our age, new routines don't sneak in quietly. You feel them pushing against the old ones, testing the locks. And every time I walked into that small corner cafe and I was aware that something in my carefully managed life had shifted without asking permission. We sat at the same table near the window, not because it was romantic, but because it was practical. Enough space. No one bumping into her chair. She'd joke that I chose it like an engineer designing an exit route. Old habits, I'd say. And new excuses, she'd reply. We talked about ordinary things at first. News headlines. Bad city planning. How every phone update made simple things harder. She had a dry humor that didn't need applause. The kind that lands once and stays. The cafe staff learned her name before they learned mine. She remembered theirs. Birthdays. Kids' names. I noticed how people leaned in when she spoke, not out of politeness, but interest. It was clear quickly, and didn't orbit her limitations. Other people orbited her clarity. One afternoon, after coffee turned into soup because neither of us wanted to leave, she asked if I wanted to see her place. Not a tour, she said quickly. Just context. Context turned out to be a small apartment, carefully adapted but not institutional. Lowered shelves. Clean lines. A kitchen arranged like a well-thought-out puzzle. There were timers labeled in thick black marker. A tablet mounted on the wall with reminders that didn't feel desperate, just organized. This is my independence, she said, tapping the counter. Not pretty, but it works. She showed me her workstation. Accounting software open. Client files neatly grouped. A calendar blocked with real deadlines, not therapy appointments. I work online, she said. Small businesses. People who don't care how I walk as long as their numbers add up. I smiled at that. I understood it too well. On one wall was a large map of the United States. Colored pins marked parks, towns, accessible trails. She noticed me looking. Places I can go, she said. Not dream locations. Real ones. There was something grounding about that map. It wasn't about what she'd lost. It was about what remained possible. We talked longer than planned. She teased me about how I always cleaned the edge of my glasses when I was thinking. I told her she used humor like a scalpel. Precise, no wasted movement. She laughed, then stopped, studying me for a moment. "You're easy to be around," she said. "But I want to ask you something." The air shifted. Not heavy, just honest. "Are you with me because you enjoy me," she asked, "or because it feels good to be needed?" The question didn't accuse. It just waited. I didn't answer right away. I went home instead, which tells you something. That night, alone in my apartment, I heard her question echo louder than the pipes and the old refrigerator. I sat at the table where my wife and I used to sort bills, and I realized how much I missed being useful to someone. How easy it would be to slip into a role that earned quiet approval without demanding truth. So the choice appeared again. It's funny how it does that, just with different clothes. Option A, say nothing. Keep being kind. Let her assume my intentions are clean and uncomplicated. Enjoy the praise, spoken and unspoken, of being a good man. Option B, tell her the uncomfortable truth. That I'm not rescuing her. That I'm not even sure where care ends and fear of emptiness begins. That I'm here because silence has started to feel heavier than effort. The next time we met, I chose the harder option. We sat in the cafe again. Same table. Same cups. Different weight. "I've been thinking about what you asked," I said. "And I don't want to pretend I'm better than I am." She watched me closely. Not anxious. Alert. "I don't need to feel needed," I continued. "But I do need to feel present. I'm tired of empty rooms. I'm not a hero, Anne. I'm just a man who doesn't want to disappear quietly." She nodded once. No drama. No relief performance. "Good," she said, "because I don't need saving. And I don't want to be anyone's proof of goodness." We sat there, the noise of the cafe wrapping around us like weather. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was standing on a stage. I felt like I was standing on level ground. When we parted that afternoon, nothing was solved. No promises made. But something subtle had changed. The tension wasn't gone, it had shifted. From uncertainty to responsibility. As I walked home, I realized I wasn't afraid of caring. I was afraid of caring honestly. And that fear, quiet as it was, followed me up the stairs into the apartment and settled in beside me. No longer something to avoid, but something I'd have to answer. The first time I pushed and through a doorway, with a crowd watching, I felt every pair of eyes like fingers on the back of my neck. The church hall smelled like coffee and sheet cake, and the room was dressed up for a fundraiser. String lights, paper centerpieces, people in their nice sweaters, pretending they weren't sizing each other up. I told myself it was just an evening out. But the moment we rolled in together, the air changed, the way it does when folks think they're witnessing something. I'm James, 61, and if you've lived long enough to know how a room can judge you before you speak, you'll understand what happened next. I've learned that some compliments are just quiet commands. Good man. Bless your heart. What a saint. They don't sound like pressure until you feel yourself start acting to deserve them. And wore a simple navy dress and a light scarf, nothing dramatic, nothing that asked for attention. She didn't need it. She moved through the room with that steady confidence of hers, greeting people by name, making a joke here and there, letting others do the awkward dancing around her chair without seeing it as her job to comfort them. I stayed close not because she asked, but because I didn't know where to put my hands. A woman from the committee hurried over and touched my arm as if we were already family. "James," she said warmly, too warmly, "you're such an inspiration." Anne's eyebrows lifted a fraction. Mine did too. "Inspiration is the dessert table," Anne said, deadpan. "That's where I'm headed." The woman laughed, relieved. Then, to me, she added in a lower voice, "God bless you for being here with her." There it was. The title. The medal. The trap. We made it to a table near the wall. I arranged things like a man setting up a defensive position. Anne's plate, her drink, a clear path beside her. People stopped by in little waves. Some spoke to her like she was glass. Others spoke to me like I was a soldier home from war. I smiled the right amount, nodded to the polite thing, but inside I could feel a tightening, like a belt pulled one notch too far. Halfway through the evening, my phone buzzed. My son Michael. I stepped into the hallway, where the noise softened into a low hum. "Dad," he said, not unkind but careful. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I answered. "I heard you went to that thing with the woman from the group." And a pause. "Right. And, look, I'm not trying to be a jerk. Are you sure you're not taking on too much? You've been alone a long time. You don't have to. Don't have to what?" I asked. He exhaled. "You don't have to prove you're a good guy. People will talk. And you'll feel obligated. I've seen it happen." After we hung up, I stood there longer than I needed to, staring at the exit sign like it might tell me what to do. When I went back in, I felt different. Not softer. Sharper. As if the room had become a test I hadn't studied for. That's when I started performing. I hovered. I checked her brakes. I asked if she was cold. I offered help before she asked, even when she didn't need it. I laughed a little too loudly when someone praised me, as if agreement would make it true, and watched me with the calm focus of someone reading a spreadsheet that suddenly doesn't balance. On the way out, a man clapped me on the shoulder. "You're a hero, James," he said. "We need more men like you." Anne's mouth tightened just a little. She didn't correct him. She didn't have to. I could feel the wrongness of it in my own chest. Outside, in the parking lot, the cold air hit me like honesty. I loaded her chair into the back of her car the way she'd shown me. Methodical, no flourish. She waited until I closed the trunk. "Do you want to come up for a minute?" she asked. Just tea. In her apartment, the quiet was different than mine. Not empty, intentional. She set the kettle on, then turned to me, hands resting lightly on the counter. "You were working tonight," she said. I blinked. "Working. Like you were on a shift. Extra careful. Extra helpful. Like you were trying to earn points." My throat tightened. "Don't," she said, not angry, just firm. I know the difference between care and performance. I live inside that difference. I sat, suddenly tired. The evening replayed in my mind. The smiles, the pats on my arm, the word hero landing like a weight. "I got a call from my son," I admitted. "He thinks I'm taking on too much." "And what do you think?" she asked. The question was gentle, but it cornered me anyway. I looked at my hands, at the way they'd become restless lately, searching for tasks so my feelings wouldn't show. Here was the choice, plain as a sign on a road. Option A, tell her everything's fine. Blame the crowd. Promise I'll relax. Keep the peace, keep the access, keep the routine we'd built. Option B, say what I was afraid to say out loud, that somewhere under the kindness there might be pity, and that the thought disgusted me and scared me because I didn't know where it ended and where my own loneliness began. I took a breath. "I'm afraid," I said. "Not of you. Of what people turn this into. Of what I turn it into. I don't want to stay because it makes me look good. And I don't want to wake up one day and realize I stayed because I couldn't stand going home to silence." And didn't flinch. She nodded slowly, like I'd finally spoken in a language she respected. "Then hear me," she said, voice low and steady. "Staying out of pity is worse than leaving. Pity hurts every day. Leaving hurts once." The words hit hard because they weren't dramatic. They were true in the way hard truths are, clean, sharp, impossible to decorate. I swallowed. "So what do we do?" "We pause," she said. "Not to punish you. To protect both of us from a story that isn't real." I wanted to argue. I wanted to promise better behavior, better motives, better everything. But I heard my own performance in those urges, and it made me quiet. At her door, I hesitated. She looked up at me, not pleading, not cold, just honest. "Go home, James," she said, "and figure out what you actually want when no one is clapping." I walked to my car alone. Halfway there, I turned back. Her porch light framed her in the doorway, still as a photograph. And for a second, I felt the old instinct to fix it, to rush back and smooth the moment into something easier. But I didn't. I drove away with her sentence in my head and a new kind of ache in my chest. Not heartbreak, not romance, but the uncomfortable realization that the most dangerous thing in the room hadn't been the crowd. It had been my need to be seen as good. Silence isn't quiet when you've learned someone's laugh by heart. It's loud. It follows you into the sink full of dishes, into the late-night news, into the moment you reach for your phone, and remember you promised yourself you wouldn't. You're hearing this from a 61-year-old man who thought he'd mastered loneliness. After, and I agreed on a pause, I told myself I'd go back to normal. I even said it out loud, like a sentence that could lock a door. Normal was my apartment above the barbershop. Same staircase, same keys, same mug, same habit of turning on the TV just to keep the walls from talking back. I walked the same routes, grocery store, pharmacy, church on Sunday, like I was retracing lines on a map I didn't want to redraw. But here's what changed. The routine didn't protect me anymore. It felt like a coat that used to fit and now hangs wrong on the shoulders. I'd catch myself thinking and would roll her eyes at this and would make a dry joke about that. I'd be standing in front of the canned soup and I'd hear her voice in my head, steady, amused, refusing to let anyone drown in self-pity. That's the part nobody warns you about. Once you meet someone who speaks to you like you're a grown man and not a project, your own silence starts sounding childish. The third day of the pause, I saw her. It was the pharmacy, late afternoon, the kind of gray winter light that makes everything look unfinished. I turned down an aisle for cold medicine I didn't need, old habit when I'm nervous, and there she was at the end cap, reaching for a jar on the top shelf with a grabber tool. Her left side moved slower, controlled, like every motion had to be negotiated. A couple walked past her and pretended not to notice. That wasn't cruelty. It was avoidance, the quiet kind. I felt my body start forward before my mind caught up. And, I said. She looked over, and for a second her face was unreadable. Then she gave me the smallest nod, like we were two people meeting in real life instead of in a story. The jar slipped. It didn't shatter, just hit the floor and rolled. My hand darted out. I picked it up and set it back on a lower shelf, where she could reach. Thanks, she said calm. I waited for the old instinct to explain myself, for the urge to make it lighter. Instead I blurted. I didn't come to fix anything. I just reacted. I know, she said. A drop jar is not a crisis, James. Her eyes held mine. Pity is. We walked. She rolled. I matched her pace toward the front of the store. Not side by side like a couple, not distant like strangers. Just two adults sharing air. Outside, the parking lot wind cut through my jacket. She stopped near her car and adjusted her scarf, patient, practiced. I stood with my hands in my pockets, feeling the pause between us like a real object. I meant what I said, she told me. About the pause. I needed to know my life doesn't depend on someone performing goodness. I understand, I said. And I did, but understanding isn't the same as knowing what to do next. She looked at me. And you? I swallowed. I'm trying to sort it out. Where care ends and fear starts. That's honest, she said. But honesty isn't a plan. There it was again, the familiar fork in the road. Option A, step back. Tell myself this was a beautiful lesson and return to my safe, empty quiet. Let time smooth it over until her voice in my head fades. Option B, admit something I've avoided my whole life, that I also need support. That partnership isn't me saving her. It's me risking being known, with all my weakness showing. I felt my chest tighten. Men my age don't like saying we need anything. We call it pride. Sometimes it's just fear with better manners. I don't want to be your project, I said. And I don't want you to be my medal. But I can't pretend I'm fine alone anymore. I'm not. The quiet isn't peaceful, it's hollow. And exhaled, as if she'd been holding her breath for an answer like that. Good, she said softly. Because I can't carry someone else's loneliness on top of my own life. I'm not asking you to, I replied. I'm asking if we can try again without roles. No hero. No victim. Just two people who tell the truth when it's ugly. She studied me. Then she nodded once, decisive. Rules, she said. We talk about the fear when it shows up. We don't let strangers write the story. And we don't rush to define what we are. That sounds grown, I said, and a small, surprised laugh escaped me. It is grown, she answered. That's the point. She pulled a folded paper from her bag, an accessible park schedule she'd printed. Saturday. There's a paved loop by the river. Benches. Coffee nearby. No performance required. I took the paper like it mattered more than it should. Saturday, I repeated. As she got into her car, she paused. James. Yeah. If you show up, she said, show up as you. Not as the man everyone wants to praise. I will, I said, and this time the promise felt less like a speech and more like a risk. I watched her drive away. Then I stood there in the cold, the paper warm in my hand, realizing the pause hadn't returned me to my old life. It had proven I didn't want it back. That night, back in my apartment, I noticed the differences like a detective. The chair by the window used to be my spot. Now it felt like a waiting room. I kept hearing and say rules, as if adulthood was something you choose again every day. I made a simple dinner and ate it without turning on the TV. The silence was still there, but it wasn't just emptiness. It was a question. Are you going to hide or are you going to live? I set the park schedule on the counter and stared at it like it was a contract. Part of me wanted to plan every word, every gesture, to make sure I didn't look like I was back on a shift. But the truth was simpler. The only thing I had to bring was myself. Before bed, I texted my son, Michael. I'm okay. I'm doing something new. And I'm doing it carefully. I'll call you Sunday. No argument, no permission, just honesty. Then I stood by the window and watched streetlights shine on wet pavement. Saturday felt close and far at the same time. And for the first time in a long while, the future didn't look like a hallway with no doors. It looked like one bench by a river, and the risk of showing up. I wasn't chasing a happy ending. I was choosing a real beginning, even if my hands shook doing it. It mattered. The thermos burned my palm through the paper sleeve, which felt fitting. Heat you can't quite hold without reminding yourself it's real. And I sat on a park bench facing the river, bundled against a sharp Saturday wind. Two people in our 60s looking less like a romance and more like a meeting that mattered. If you're watching this, you know how the world treats meetings at our age. Younger folks call it practical. Friends call it smart. And somewhere inside, you hear the old fear, don't hope too much. Don't ask for more than you're allowed. And set her own thermos beside mine. Then pulled a thin folder from her bag. No drama, no size. Just paper. The kind of paper that tells the truth. I didn't bring this to scare you, she said. I brought it because pretending costs more than honesty. Inside were appointment cards, a rehab schedule, a list of questions for her next neurologist visit. A simple page titled, What I Can Do Alone / What I Need Help With. Not written for pity, written for planning. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Most people would hide this, I admitted. Most people get exhausted performing, she replied. I'm done with that. We sat a moment, listening to the river push past rocks like it had somewhere to be. The bench was cold through my coat. My knees ached the way they always do when the temperature drops. I took a sip of coffee and tasted something I hadn't tasted in years, being awake to another person's reality without trying to fix it, and pointed to the folder. My future has doctor visits and bad days. It also has good days. But I won't sell you a fairy tale. I nodded. I won't ask for one. Then I slid my own envelope across the bench. It wasn't as neat as hers. Mine was a mess of lab results, a prescription list, and the kind of paperwork you keep just in case you end up in a hospital alone. I'd never shown it to anyone. Her eyes softened, not in sympathy, in recognition. You're serious, she said. I'm tired of acting like I'm not aging, I told her. And I'm tired of acting like I'm fine on my own. That's when the conversation turned into something I can only describe as an adult agreement. Not vows. Not promises carved in stone. More like two people drawing a map together, knowing the weather can change. We need rules, and said, the way she'd said it before, like rules were freedom. Okay, I answered. Rules. She counted on her fingers. First, either of us can say, today I'm scared, or today I'm tired, without it becoming a guilt weapon. I nodded. Second, help is not a debt. We talk about each step instead of assuming. Third, she added, if you ever feel you're staying out of pity, you say it out loud, before it rots. And if you ever feel like you're becoming my project, I said, you tell me. Immediately. She looked at me then, direct as ever. Can you handle that? The truth, even when it makes you look smaller. Here's where I'll be honest with you. I wanted to say yes like a hero. I wanted to be the steady man in a story. But the old instinct crept in, prove yourself, earn approval, carry everything silently. That instinct has been with me my whole life. So the choice showed up one last time. Option A. Turn this into a performance of goodness. Say the right words, carry the weight, collect the quiet praise, and slowly disappear inside the role. Option B. Accept that this is a daily decision. No guarantees. No forever that protects you from tomorrow. Just honesty, again and again, even when it's awkward. I inhaled and chose the second option. I can't promise I'll never be afraid, I said. But I can promise I won't hide it behind a smile. Anne's mouth curved into the smallest smile, not romantic, relieved. That's all I need, she said. A partner, not a saint. We didn't kiss. We didn't do anything cinematic. We just sat there, watching a dog chase a stick along the bank, listening to two teenagers laugh too loudly, watching life keep moving without asking for permission. Later that week, we went to her rehab center together. If you've never been in one, it's fluorescent lights and rubber floors, and people working hard at things the rest of us take for granted. Anne checked herself in. She spoke with the therapist like an equal. I carried her folder, then handed it back like it belonged to her, because it did. In the waiting area, we joked about the terrible coffee. She teased me for reading every sign on the wall. I teased her for correcting a nurse's math. Nothing about it felt like a love story. It felt like life, paperwork, appointments, patience, humor, the quiet courage of showing up. That evening, I went back to my apartment above the barbershop. Same stairs, same keys, same mug in the sink. But the place didn't feel like a bunker anymore. I sat at my table and realized something that surprised me. I didn't feel proud. Not the way people mean when they call you a good man. I felt calm, like I'd stopped trying to earn a title and started choosing a presence. And had texted me earlier. Next Tuesday. Same cafe. Don't be late, numbers guy. I smiled at the phone, then set it down and let the quiet exist without filling it with television noise. The silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space, room for another person to be real in my life, and for me to be real too. And if you take anything from my story, let it be this. I'm not rescuing her. I'm not proving anything. I'm 61, and I'm simply choosing to be with her today, honestly, carefully, without pretending that's the same as certainty. On my way home from the center, I caught my reflection in the dark window of the bus stop. An older man holding a folder like it mattered. I didn't look heroic. I looked human. And for once, that didn't scare me. It made me think of Linda, not with the sharp pain of loss, but with a quiet gratitude that she once taught me how to share a life instead of just survive it. I whispered, I'm trying, to nobody, and meant it. Tomorrow can ask its questions when it arrives.